Okay, so picture this, the 18th century, a time when, the rules were rigid and the consequences for breaking them severe, especially for women. But get this, historically, only about 5% of women who were sentenced to death were actually executed, compared to a much higher rate for men.
Mm.
What does that tell you about the women who dared to defy those norms?
Well, it speaks volumes about their audacity, their resilience. It suggests they were a force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into the lives of two such women, Anne Bonny and Mary Read.
Ah, yes.
They were pirates, living lives of danger and freedom in a world that tried to, confine them. You might have heard their names before, but they're real stories drawn from historical accounts like Pirate Queens by Dr. Rebecca Simon and the novel Salt Blood by Francesca de Torres are even more fascinating than the legends.
Yeah. It's important to remember, though, that much of what we know about Anne and Mary comes from Captain Charles Johnson's 1724 book, A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates. While a valuable source, its accuracy has been debated among historians.
Yeah. It's like sifting through layers of myth and reality to uncover the truth. What we do know is that both Anne and Mary had unconventional beginnings, both born illegitimate, both disguised as boys early in life.
Right.
One can't help but wonder how this early experience of gender fluidity shaped their choices.
Yeah. Think about it. Growing up, pretending to be someone you're not, navigating a world that expects you to fit a certain mold, that experience could either make you conform or ignite a spark of rebellion.
Especially for Mary Read. De Torres' novel vividly portrays her, disguised as Mark, enlisting in the Royal Navy,
Yeah.
then the Army.
Wow.
These are careers utterly unimaginable for most women at the time.
And what's fascinating here is that through de Torres' words, we experience what it might have been like for Mary to exist in these, hyper-masculine environments.
Yeah.
The cramped quarters, the constant threat of violence, the lack of opportunity even for men.
De Torres even mentions a surprising detail. When ships docked to prevent desertion and, well, let's just say unwanted incidents, shore leave was often denied. So you had sailors packed like sardines, families visiting, and even sex workers allowed on board.
It was a melting pot of social dynamics, a pressure cooker of tensions, and a far cry from the romanticized image of a carefree sailor's life.
Makes you wonder why anyone would choose piracy knowing all this. Where's the allure in that?
That's the thing. The popular image of pirates with buried treasure and swashbuckling adventures, largely a myth.
So no chests overflowing with gold or epic battles on the high seas.
Not quite. Most pirates, as Simon points out, captured relatively small prizes. Their lives were dangerous, often short and far from glamorous, but de Torres highlights that after the War of the Spanish Succession, many sailors, including privateers, found themselves unemployed. For some, piracy became a means of survival.
So it wasn't always about the riches, but sometimes about sheer necessity. That's a perspective you don't often hear. But there's another surprise. While pirate ships are associated with lawlessness, they were, believe it or not, surprisingly structured.
In fact, they were surprisingly democratic.
Really?
Yeah, they had these contracts called ship's articles, outlining everything from rules and punishments to how the loot would be divided.
Wait, democratic pirates? That seems like a contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? But think about it. This system, where many crew members got a fair share, fostered loyalty and minimized mutiny. It was practical, even egalitarian in a way that traditional naval structures weren't.
That flips the script on what we think we know about pirates. It was a system born of necessity and practicality, rather than some romantic ideal. Speaking of breaking the mold, how did a woman like Anne Bonny end up in this world?
Anne's journey is one of defiance and passion. She found herself in the Americas, where she met the notorious pirate Calico Jack Rackham. And their relationship, it was a scandal from the start.
What made their relationship so scandalous?
Well, for starters, Anne was already married. But she and Rackham were determined to be together. He even tried to buy her freedom from her husband. Believe it or not, this was a somewhat common practice in the Caribbean back then.
Really? Trying to buy your lover out of a marriage? That's a bold move.
Indeed. However, the governor who was cracking down on piracy intervened, threatening Anne with imprisonment and whipping. And that's when she and Rackham, in a daring move, stole a ship and embraced a life of piracy.
Their escape was a bold statement, a refusal to be confined by the expectations of society. But where does Mary Read fit into all of this?
That's where the intrigue deepens. We know she joined Rackham's crew, but the circumstances of her arrival are shrouded in mystery. Johnson claims she was disguised as a man, but official documents from the time mention a female pirates aboard, suggesting her gender was known.
So perhaps she joined willingly, even influenced by a possible connection to a pirate husband mentioned in historical records.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this brings us to a fascinating aspect of their story, clothing and gender identity. While they likely wore men's clothing at sea for practical reasons, engravings from their time depict them fighting with feminine features, even exposed breasts.
It's like they were playing with gender expectation,
Yeah.
challenging the very notion of what it meant to be a woman in their time. And this raises a question that has captivated people for centuries. Were Anne and Mary lovers?
It's a question that has fueled much speculation. But with the limited documentation on female sexuality during that era and the tendency for sensationalism, it's difficult to separate fact from fiction.
So we are left with more questions than answers, which, let's be honest, is part of what makes history so intriguing.
Absolutely. And speaking of intrigue, their story takes a dramatic turn with their capture and trial. Remember how we talked about courts being more lenient towards women?
Yeah.
Well, this case was anything but ordinary.
That's a perfect place to stop for now. I'm on the edge of my seat. Let's delve into that trial and its aftermath in part 2 of our deep dive into the lives of Anne Bonny and Mary Read. We left off with Anne and Mary facing trial, and as you mentioned, things were about to get even more complicated. They were tried separately, which was unusual in itself.
Yeah, it was. And while they all received death sentences, both Anne and Mary had their executions delayed.
Why was that? What made their case so different?
Well, they were both pregnant, and not just a little bit. They were far along enough to have quickened, meaning they could feel the fetus moving.
So they were likely pregnant before they even became pirates. Talk about adding another layer of complexity to their already unconventional lives.
It certainly challenges the narrative of hardened criminals, doesn't it? But even with this stay of execution, their fates are shrouded in mystery.
So what ultimately happened to these rebellious women?
Well, records indicate that Mary Read likely died in prison, from jail fever, most likely typhus, perhaps complicated by childbirth.
That's a tragic end to a life that defied so many expectations. What about Anne? Did she meet a similar fate?
Anne's story is less clear-cut. Some historians believe she may have returned to the Carolinas, disappearing into anonymity. Others point to death records in Jamaica indicating a woman named Anne Bonny was buried there around 1730.
So she might have stayed in Jamaica, but whether she lived out her days in prison or as a free woman, we just don't know. It's as though their story ends with a question mark, leaving us to ponder the possibilities.
And yet, despite their relatively short careers as pirates, Anne and Mary have become iconic figures, almost mythical in their stature. How is it that these women who sailed under the black flag for a mere few months captured our imaginations for centuries?
Their story certainly resonates. But what do you think it is about their lives that has made them such enduring figures in popular culture?
Well, Captain Johnson's book played a significant role. It was a bestseller, reprinted countless times. Their names often featured prominently on the covers. Their story, though perhaps embellished, was widely circulated.
It seems their tale became almost a template for how we imagine female pirates bold and defiant.
Exactly. And as literacy rates increased and other forms of entertainment like plays and eventually movies emerged, their story was adapted and reinterpreted, further solidifying their place in our cultural lexicon.
There's something undeniably captivating about figures who defy expectations, who break free from society's constraints. And Anne and Mary embody that. They were women who chose their own path, a path that led them to the high seas and a life outside the law.
And that challenge to the status quo, that assertion of individual will, speaks to something deep within us. They force us to question the roles we assign to women, the limitations we impose, and the power of choice, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
They also remind us that the romanticized image of piracy we often see in movies doesn't reflect the full reality. These women face hardship danger and the complexities of a life lived outside the boundaries of conventional society.
Their story compels us to look beyond the surface, to recognize the strength and resilience required to navigate such a world. They were more than just swashbuckling adventurers. They were women fighting for survival-seeking agency in a world that offered them few options.
And in that struggle, in their refusal to be defined by the limitations placed upon them, lies the essence of their enduring appeal. They represent rebellion, resilience, and the human desire for freedom in the face of adversity.
They stand as a testament to the power of individual choice and the enduring strength of the human spirit, reminding us that even in the darkest corners of history, we can find stories of courage and defiance that continue to inspire us centuries later.
Their legacy is a powerful one. It makes you think.
Yeah.
What is it about Anne and Mary's story that resonates with you personally? What aspects of their lives stand out as particularly meaningful?
For me, it's their audacity. They were born into a world that sought to define them, confine them, yet they chose a different path. They challenged not only societal norms, but also the very notion of who could be a pirate.
It's that spirit of defiance, that refusal to be put in a box, that makes their story so compelling. Do you think their story can inspire us to challenge the norms we encounter in our own lives?
Absolutely. Their story reminds us that we always have a choice. Even when it seems like the options are limited, it encourages us to question the boundaries we create for ourselves and to consider what might be possible if we, dared to break free.
It's a reminder that history is full of untold stories, of individuals who challenged the status quo and forged their own destinies, and Anne and Mary are prime examples of that.
Precisely. Their stories, though incomplete, offer a glimpse into a world that was both brutal and liberating, and they challenge us to look beyond the romanticized image of piracy, to see the real people behind the legends, the individuals who dared to live on their own terms.
So for those listening who are left wanting more, what would you recommend? Where can we go to delve deeper into the lives of these remarkable women?
If you're looking for a deep dive into the historical context, Dr. Rebecca Simon's Pirate Queens is an excellent resource. It provides a well-researched and insightful look at the lives of Anne Bonny and Mary Read, separating fact from fiction, offering a nuanced perspective on their place in history.
And for a captivating, fictionalized account that brings Mary Read's story to life, I highly recommend Salt Blood by Francesca de Torres. It's a thrilling read that will transport you to the 18th century Caribbean and immerse you in Mary's world.
Both books offer unique perspectives on these fascinating figures, and I guarantee you'll finish them with a newfound appreciation for their courage, their complexity, and their enduring impact on our cultural imagination.
Well, there you have it. Another fascinating deep dive into history's hidden corners. We hope you enjoyed exploring the lives of Anne Bonny and Mary Read, two women who dared to challenge the norms of their time and live life on their own terms.
And remember, history is full of untold stories waiting to be discovered. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep listening to The Deep Dive.